afternoon, everyone. I am here to discuss to you about the privilege tax and value-added tax. So first, we will discuss the privilege tax, and after that, we will discuss the value-added tax. So let's begin. So what is a privilege tax nga ba? According to the book, a privilege tax is a tax laid upon the privilege of engaging in business or pursuing an occupation, calling, or profession. Meaning, a privilege tax is a tax to have a right to conduct a business in the location. Privilege tax it is also known as franchise tax because it refers to the special privilege conferred by the government on an individual or corporation which not belong to the citizen by common right. So, for deep understanding, if the business owner like to open a business, or if the person would like to open a business, she or he needs to pay a privilege tax so that the government give him a license to operate in the said location.
Example, the privilege tax.
Hi, attorney. Good evening. Sorry I'm late. Oh, attorney, thank you for accepting my invitation and, thank you for your time.
Sus, wala yun. It's my pleasure. So, what we're going to discuss is
So, we're going to discuss for tonight is, I'm thinking for the past few months, I want sana na, to start a business. So, I called you because I want to have a consultation first so that I want to know if what taxes and what permits should I pay first to operate my business and my business will be legal.
Honored Miss Roxine, na ako yung napili mo na isa sa mga mag-consult about your business. And yun nga, lagi ko sinasabi sa mga client ko na it's a wise decision to have a consultation first before doing or starting their business. And since hindi siya madali and risk siya, once na may mali kang step na nagawa is wala na. And in establishing a business, it is a common to pay tax even you will establish a sari-sari store. And makikita nga natin na kapag tayo kumakain sa mga restaurant or nag-grocery, meron tayong binabayaran mga tax. And yun, sa case natin, kahit na magtatayo tayo ng business, we should pay tax. And in your case, it is a large business, and you should also pay permits and taxes so that you can have a license to operate. One of those taxes is a privilege tax.
Sorry to interrupt you, attorney, but can I ask what is privilege tax because it's a new word for me.
It means, Ms. Roxine, before you operate your business, you need to pay first the privilege tax. Because once you pay the privilege tax, you will have a license to operate. Meaning your business will be legal and you will be registered in the BIR. Also, once you're registered in BIR, you have the power to collect the value-added tax. You're welcome as always, Mr. Psin. And what's now? You're going to pursue your business? Okay, see you again next week so that we can process your paper. Thank you, Mr. Psin. I have an urgent. Let's see you this week. See you. Thank you.
End. Nature of privilege tax.
Nature of privilege tax is not passed to tax on property or person, it is passed to raise revenue.
Power to impose and increase privilege taxes.
For the power to impose and increase privilege taxes, there are two: the power of legislature to impose taxes, and the power of imposing a privilege tax is not exhausted once exercised. There are four kinds of privilege taxes under the tax codes. It includes the VAT or value added tax, other percentage tax, excise taxes, and documentary stamp taxes. A person may be subject to the taxes although he or she is not engaged in any business. Meaning, kahit na ang isang tao is not involved in the business, they are also subjected to pay tax. So, what is business nga ba according to the law? According to the tax codes, business in the trade or commercial sense only, meaning trading or commercial is the sense of business which the purpose is to gain profit or the motive is livelihood. Meaning, the business owner is not opening or establishing a business because they establishing it for to gain profit or to give an employment to the citizen. Mean to engage in business. First is to engage in business is to begin and be on a business or to enjoy or involve oneself therein. Sabi dito, malalaman mo na kapag ang isang tao is engaged or into the business, kailangan daw mag-umpisa siyang bumuo ng negosyo tapos palalaguin niya to. Next is, business is that which occupies the time, attention, and labor of men for livelihood or profit. Sinasabi naman dito, ang pagnenegosyo daw ay seryosong bagay na kailangan mo ng buong attention, time, and pagtatrabaho. Hindi mabubuo yung isang negosyo kapag may nawalang isa doon. For example, you have only attention and labor in your business, pero yung oras mo is tutok ka sa ibang bagay. So, hindi fulfill ng efforts mo yung profit na sinasabi kasi kulang ka sa oras. Nawalan ka ng isang aspect, which is dapat kakasama yon: oras, attention, and labor of men. Lastly is, to engage in business is construed as signifying employment which occupies the time, attention, and labor also for the purposes of a livelihood or profit. Dito man, sinasabi na in order to engage in business, kailangan mo yung three aspect na nabanggit kanina, yung time, attention, and labor of men. Kapag kulang ka dito is hindi mag-work yung business mo. And kung talagang gusto mo or desidido ka na maging maayos yung business mo, is dapat you have to sacrifice things para makapagbigay ka ng sapat o higit na oras sa negosyo mo, and yung attention mo is buong buo and focus ka lang sa bagay na yon. At syempre, hindi dapat mawawalan ng sipag, commitment, tsaka yung dedikasyon mo is dapat nandun.
When single act deemed transaction in business.
Next is when single act deemed transaction in business. Tax are imposed for person who is engaged in sale, barter, or exchange of merchandise. For example, a person prepares to carry a business of a wholesale tobacco dealer and holds himself out and solicits trade as such, although he makes only one sale without a license. If he intends to continue the business, engage in business in the meaning of the law. Meaning, if even the person is bought an item and sold it tomorrow, it will be considered a business according to the meaning of the law. So now, let's move on to the value-added tax. So, value-added tax is makikita natin to kahit saan: resibo ng grocery, resibo ng mga resto, resibo ng mga services na kinukuha natin. And I know that all of you know what is VAT, but to have a deeper understanding, let's discuss the value-added tax or VAT. According to the book
Value-added tax VAT is a consumption tax imposed at every stage of the distribution process on the sale, barter, exchange including transactions deemed by law as a sale or lease of goods or properties, and rendition of services in the course of trade or business or on the importation of goods, whether such imported goods are for use in the business or not.
sabi dito, yung VAT ay tax na charge or kinokollect sa sales of goods or services ng isang negosyo or ng isang seller. And it is required to collect it to their customer and to remit to the government. Hi guys! Andito tayo ngayon sa Arco Villa. Kasama ko yung mga friends ko and andito kami sa Starbucks. Bumili kami ng mga drinks namin. Mamaya mabibil refill kami since yung mga kasama ko is hindi sila yung umorder. So ayan yung mga kasama ko, yung mga friends ko. Nagsama-sama kami kasi mag-group study kami and syempre chikahan na rin ng content. So, ayun guys, ito yung mga in-order namin. Yung sa akin is yung bago nilang flavor, yung Belgium chocolate. Yun. Ikaw na in-order mo?
Sa akin, strawberry and cream. Paubos na nga, oh. Sa akin, bestseller, white mocha.
Sa akin naman is chocolate cream since mahilig ako sa chocolate.
Yun. Since magagabi na rin, maglalaro kami ng parang bill refill. Tas kung sino yung makahula, siya magbabayad. Babayaran niya yung nagbayad. Ganon. Ano? Game. So, sinong unang huhula? Ikaw na lang.
Okay.
Tingin mo magkano binayaran natin?
A few moments later.
1,000.
Oh, 1,000 for 4 drinks one day. Ikaw?
Sa akin, ano lang, mga nasa 900.
Huh? 900?
900, no?
Grabe. Ang mahal naman. Nasa ano, one day sahod ng isang empleyado.
Ikaw ba? Sa akin naman ay nasa 800.
Huh? 800? 800, 900, 1,000. Grabe. Ano ta dito, nasa minimum wage ng isang nag-work na empleyado. Tapos mga student pa. So, ayun nga, since,
Bill, reveal.
ganun mo yun.
Bill, reveal. Bill, reveal.
Ayun. Ano? Di kita.
Hindi siya kita. Oh, nakita nyo? Hindi, di ba?
So, ayun, yung bill namin, since yung price niya is nasa 200 plus and apat yung inumin, yung naging price ng binili namin is 835. Ang nanalo si ano?
Si Molly yan.
Hindi, si Talampa, since mababa siya yung pinakamalapit, 900.
Ay, wait lang, wait.
Wait lang, syempre yung magbabayad muna, 835.
Hindi. Ay,
Anong hindi?
akala ko sino nakahula.
Oh, ayun nga, ikaw magbabayad ka kasi malapit yun sa'yo eh. Oh,
So, ayan guys.
oh diba? Keep the change. Ang mga walang kaibigan namin. Keep the change. Since nasa receipt na tayo, di ba?
Uy, wait lang. Speaking of receipt, di ba?
Na
Di ba-
pag-aaralan natin sa taxation.
Oo, di ba subject tayo taxation ngayon? Then, nasa topic na tayo ng, ng VAT.
Yeah.
Ako hindi kasi doon sa book, yung VAT kasi, pwede natin makita yung sa mga receipt pag bumili tayo ng mga goods from sa store na nagbayad ng privilege tax. So, tignan natin.
So, isa sa mga
totoo.
nagbabayad ng privilege tax, isang Starbucks.
Yeah.
Tignan natin.
Tignan natin kung totoong may VAT ba talaga sila and ilang percent yung VAT na binibigay nila sa mga consumer nila. And sabi kasi kapag daw more than 12% yung binigay nila is pwede silang hulihin ng BIR. Check natin kung yung VAT ba na binibigay ng Starbucks is 12%. Na binigay sa amin ng Starbucks is yung VAT nila na binibigay sa consumer is 12%, which is ang bill dapat lang namin is 746, pero since na transferable na yung VAT, naging
835.
835 yung bill namin.
Because 12% ng 746 is 89.52 kaya naging 835 ang binayaran.
So, ayun guys. Every time na bibili kayo sa mga grocery, yung mga big grocery, always check yung VAT and
Yung
pwede
receipt nyo.
Mm-mm.
Makikita nyo dun yung VAT. And speaking of, hindi lang VAT ang makikita mo sa receipt. Also, meron din dong zero base rate.
Yeah.
Meron din doon VAT accepted. May makikita rin kayo doon sa
Basta, always check your receipt kung yung business is provide lang nila sa consumer nila is 12% VAT. Kapag lumagpas sila sa 12%, pwede nyo silang ireklamo sa BIR.
O, diba? Bumili lang kami. May natutunan pa kami.
True.
kaya ano pa nga thank you nag-promote.
Basta yon. Tas, as a smart buyer, kasi every time na bumibili yung parents ko sa grocery, lagi niyang chine-check. Ultimo yung mga items na binibili niya. And chine-check niya din kung magkano yung VAT na binibigay sa kanya. Siyempre, sa sobrang mahal ng bilihin ngayon, dapat wise ka rin. Ganon. Ayun guys, tapos na yung yaman-yamanan session namin for today. Lalabas na kami. Kasi
Sana may natutunan kayo.
medyo madilim na. And sana may natutunan kayo sa amin.
Bye!
Bye! See you next time. And don't forget to
Like,
Share.
and subscribe.
Nature of VAT.
For the nature of VAT, the tax called VAT because it is imposed on the value not previously subjected to the VAT on the value added to the goods or services at each stage of the distribution chain. First, VAT is a privilege tax. Yung VAT is di daw ginawa para sa product. Ginawa yon para sa pagbebenta ng produkto. Meaning, as long as na hindi mo nabebenta yung product, wala kang makukuha na value-added tax. Wala kang makukuha kahit piso. Kahit na sa consumer mo sinisingil yung VAT, yung nagbebenta pa rin yung liable na magbayad ng VAT sa government. Next is, it is an ad valorem tax. Meaning, habang tumataas yung price, tataas din yung value ng VAT. Tataas yung price, tataas yung value ng VAT. Next is an indirect tax. VAT is transferable. From the word transferable, pwede nating i-transfer yung VAT from VAT person na babayad to the consumer na singilin ng VAT testers. Lastly, it is ultimately a tax on consumption, meaning yung percentage na VAT ng Philippines is fixed, which is 12% only. According to ito, pwede taasan since nasa loto ng Philippines. And kapag binago mo yung VAT percentage mo, pwede kang hulihin ng IR. So let's proceed to the VAT system.
The VAT system.
First is tax relief. It means that the former tax system replaced to taxing goods and services on than those subject to excise tax. Let's consider an example where a business is subject to the original tax of 12% on its gross sales. And if the business sells goods with a total of 10,000 pesos, it will calculate the sales tax as 12% of the gross sales, which amounts to 1,200 pesos. The total amount the total amount that the business would receive from the customers, including the sales tax, would be 11,200. Next is subsequent sales. It is a tax imposed on every sale after the original sale of taxable article. For instances, if a manufacturer sells a product to a distributor for 1,000 pesos, and they will charge the regular sales tax of 12%, resulting in a tax of 120 pesos. And the total amount that the distributor should pay would be 1,120 pesos. And if the distributor later sells the same product to a retailer for 1,200, they would be charged the subsequent sales of 12,000 on this subsequence. The subsequent sales tax would amount to 144, which is 12% of 1,200. So making the total amount paid by the retailer would be 1,344. For the advanced sales tax imposed on the importation of goods, the purpose of this is the advance payment is to ensure the tax authority receives tax revenue upfront and to prevent potential tax evasion or cash flow issues by collecting a portion of the sale tax in advance. The tax authority can ensure timely payment and reduce the risk of non-compliance. The payment naman, the advance sales tax is usually payable at the time of importation or shortly thereafter. It is important to comply with the payment deadline specified by the tax authority to avoid any penalties or interest charges. For compensating tax, it is imposed on the importation of goods for non-business use, meaning compensation tax or compensating tax, meaning compensating tax is a form of tax levied on imported goods to offset any potential revenue loss resulting from the exemption or reduced rate of value-added tax or sales tax on such goods. The purpose of compensating tax is to ensure a level playing field between domestically produced goods and imported goods. It aims to prevent tax avoidance or unfair competition by imposing equivalent tax burden on imported goods for personal use. Next is excise tax. Excise tax imposed on a certain article, like matches, solvents, and videotapes payable by manufacturers or importers. Is miller tax imposed in the production or milling of certain agricultural products like rope, sugar, coconut, and palm oil, cassava flour, and desiccated coconut. Um, For deep understanding, let's consider a VAT-registered miller who produces and sells rice, and the miller is subject to VAT and is required to charge VAT on the sale of wet flour to their consumer or customer. Suppose the miller sells 1,000 kilograms of rice at selling price of 2 pesos per kilogram and the VAT rate is 12%. The VAT registered miller would calculate the VAT amount as follows. VAT amount equals selling price times VAT rate. Lastly is percentage taxes payable by contractor, brokers, lessors or personal property, and lessors or distributors of cinematographic films. Um, Dito naman sa percentage taxes, specific types of taxes that are calculated as a percentage of certain transaction or activities. Next is advantages. Value-added tax or VAT has several advantages which contribute to its popularity and implementation in economies. The advantages of VAT are it eliminates the cascading problem experienced under the former sales tax, particularly the subsequent tax, because only the value-added tax to the sale is subject thereto. Um, Meaning one of the significant advantages of value-added tax compared to the former sales tax is the elimination of cascading problem, also known as tax cascading or tax pyramiding. Avoidance of tax on tax. VAT is designed to be a multi-stage tax system where the tax is applied at each stage of supply chain. Unlike the former sales tax, VAT first eliminates the cascading problem experienced under the former sales tax, particularly the subsequent tax, because only the value-added tax to the sale is subject thereto. Next is in its ideal form. VAT is neutral between different goods, properties, and services or businesses, and therefore more equitable because it generally applies to all persons and transactions at uniform rate. Dito pumapasok yung equal treatment sa pagbayad ng tax kahit na same industry or magkaibang industry kayo, and regardless size, scale of operation, or market presence, the businesses are subject to the same VAT, which is 12% only according to the rules and regulation. And this ensures a level playing field and avoidance using or giving undue advantages to specific businesses over others. Next is establishes a wider tax base, making taxation fairer and more equitable. VAT treats all businesses in the same industry or sector equally, regardless nga sa size niya, scale of operation, or market presence niya. Next is it is simply easy to administer and to comply with because it provides for only two rates, replacing a number of percentage taxes. Next is payments are now based on the output tax and the input tax, as supported by receipts, thereby minimizing tax evasion. VAT requires businesses to maintain proper records and documentation, including the invoices, receipts for VAT returns. By basing VAT payments on the input taxes and output taxes supported by these receipts, the tax authority by the accuracy of VAT payments, and transparency helps ensure the integrity of the tax system and reduce the risk of tax evasion. Lastly, is expected to generate large revenues. Apply the value of businesses during various parts of the economy. This tax is ensure that each portion of this tax being ensured to a portion of economic activity is subject to VAT. As a result, the total revenue base for VAT substantial.
I hope that you learned something from my presentation. I hope that you learned.
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Nandito nga po pala tayo sa Capital Commerce. Ako nga po pala si Jed Padilla para interviewin ng isang nagtatrabaho sa BIA at upang maintindihan natin ang advantage ng VAT. So Miss Christine Reyes, ano nga po ba ang advantage ng VAT?
Unang advantages ng VAT ay isang pagtanggal ng cascading problem. Ano nga ba ang cascading problem? ang cascading problem na kung saan ay buwis ay naiipon sa bawat yugto ng production na maaaring humantong sa isang pasani ng pangkalahatang buwis ng produkto or services na maaaring maging pasani na mamimili sa mas mataas na presyo ng produkto. Ang pangalawang advantages naman ay neutral, operate sa mga iba't ibang uri ng negosyo. Pangatlo, nagtatatag ito ng mas malawak na base ng buwis na mas patas at pantay sa bawat negosyo. Pang-apat, madaling sundin dahil nagbibigay lang ito ng dalawang rate. Isang rate ay 12% at 0%. Pang-lima, ang VAT na sinisingil ay nakabatay lamang sa output tax na suportado ng resibo. At panghuli, it expected to generate large revenues to the all types of business.
So ayun po, maraming salamat kay Miss Christine Reyes sa pagbibigay niyo ng magandang impormasyon para sa ating lahat. Ay lamang po. Salamat.
So our next topic is about sales of goods or properties. So first is requisites for liabilities. So requisites for liabilities is about for VAT to be charged other than on imports. So this condition must be satisfied their sale, barter, exchange, or less in the Philippines. So, and also, the VATable transaction must be involve taxable goods, properties, or service, and VATable transaction must be made by a taxable person in the course of trade or business. Next is about activity in trade or business. So, the VATable transaction must be in the course of trade or business. However, the importation of goods may be for business or non-business use. So, it means that the association dues, membership fees, and other assessment or charges collected by condominium corporation are not subject to VAT because this collection do not arise from transactions involving sale, barter, or exchange of goods or property. Membership fees and assessment dues of recreational clubs only constitute contributions to and or replenishment of the funds for the maintenance and operations of the facilities offered by recreational clubs to their exclusive members. Number 3 is about number 3, the sale of asset for the privatization of National Power Corporation or NPC by Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation under its mandate under R1 number 9136, otherwise known as the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, is not subjected to VAT. So next is transaction incidental to pursuit of commercial or economic activity. So for this, it means that these transactions are not primarily focused on the business but are necessary or closely related to its course or operation. For example, procurement of goods and services, acquiring raw materials, supplies, or services necessary for production, manufacturing, or provision of goods or services. Next is sales and distribution. So, sales and distribution, selling products or services to customers, including invoicing, delivery, and related activities. So, next is rate and base of VAT on the sale of goods and properties. So, for number 1 is the 12% VAT. So, there shall be levied, assessed, and collected on every sale, barter, or exchange or transaction deemed sale of taxable goods or properties. So next is zero-rated sale of goods or properties. So zero-rated Transaction refers to a sale, barter exchange, or less of goods or properties and or service by a VAT person subject to a VAT at the rate of 0. So it means that zero-rated transaction ay isang palitan o pagbebenta ng mga produkto or serbisyo na subjected sa 0% VAT rate. So number 1, sales subject to 0% VAT. So, ibig sabihin, ang zero-rated ay na gagamit lang yan if you're a VAT registered. So, ibig sabihin, pag VAT registered ka na, ibig sabihin, automatically ka ng zero-rated person. Next is, number 2 is export sales. So, export sales may be direct or indirect made by VAT registered person. So, the sales and actual shipment of goods from the Philippines to a foreign country. So, yun yung export sales. Also, the sale of raw materials or packaging materials to a non-resident buyer for delivery to a residential local export. So, yung parang dito is parang kunwari, ako as a buyer or seller ako, pero ang supplier ko is nasa ibang bansa. So, dun na pupunta yung non-resident non-resident. Tapos, bibiling ko siya. So, ibig sabihin, papasok siya sa residential natin dito sa Pilipinas. So, letter C, the sale of raw materials or packaging materials to export-oriented enterprise whose export sales exceed 70% of total annual production. So, and also letter D, transaction considered export sales under Executive Order number 226. And letter E is the sale of goods, supplies, equipment, and fuel to persons engaged in international shipping or international air transport operation, provided that goods, etc. shall be used or for said operations. So for number 3 is about need for prior application and BIR approval. So for this, except for export sales and foreign currency sales, other cases of zero-rated sales and foreign currency sales shall require prior application with the appropriate BIR office or effective zero rating. So last is about pertinent rules. So pertinent rules, the zero VAT on export sales is an incentive to exporters. While their sales are subjected to zero rate, they are entitling to claim VAT refunds or credits on their VAT inputs. Next topic is about effectively zero-rated sale of goods or properties. Yun nga, refers to the local sales of goods and properties by a VAT registered person to a person or entity who was granted indirect tax exemption under laws or international agreements. So number 1, although not involving actual export, it is considered as constructive export also. So, and number 2, sales of goods to international organization and diplomats who are tax exempt under special laws or international agreements are effectively zero rated. So number 3, para maging effectively zero-rated siya, so for the sales of goods and services to persons engaged in international shipping are subject to VAT zero rating only if the sale pertains to or is directly attributable to the transfer of goods and passengers from port in the Philippines directly to the foreign port. 4 is exemption expressly granted under special laws. Example is the sales to enterprises duly registered and accredited with Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority. So next is the transaction involving real property. So So, persons liable to VAT. So, persons liable to VAT, this person engaged in real estate business are liable to VAT. So, ibig sabihin, any persons who engage in selling of real estate or leasing or subleasing of real property are subjected to pay the 12% VAT. So, here are the example of persons liable to VAT. So, any person, whether natural or juridical, engaged in the sale, barter, or exchange of real properties in the course of trade or business. So, one of them, pasok yan. So, ito din ang isa pang mga liable na nagbabayad ng VAT is yung mga nagpapaupa ng bahay or ng mga space or property. And pangatlo is yun yung mga non-resident lessors of property na located dito sa Philippines. So, kahit hindi ka resident na dito sa Pilipinas, but you have a place here in the Philippines na located dito. So, pasok pa din yun sa na kailangan magbayad ng VAT. And last na example is yung mga non-stock or non-profit organization engaged in the sale, barter, exchange, or lease of real property. And also, hindi lang pala yun. So, meron pa nga tayong yung mga government or its agencies and instrumentalities, including the GOCCs, engage in the sale, barter, or exchange or lease of real property in the ordinary course of trade or business. So, example nito is, the property is for lease, the owner is non-resident of the Philippines, and pero yung property na yun is nandito sa Pilipinas. So, kahit yung owner na yun is wala na sa Pilipinas, yung owner na yun is liable pa din na magbayad ng VAT. So, parang nga nasabi ko, kahit hindi ka resident dito, pero may place kang pinapaupa dito, it's still liable ka na magbabayad ng VAT. So, for number 2, under of transactions involving real properties is the transaction subject to VAT. So, sale of real properties primarily for sale to customers or held to lease in the ordinary course of trade or business of the seller are subjected to VAT. So lahat ng transaction na subjected to VAT is yung pagbebenta ng property or pagpapaupa, ganun. For example na lang is, if si Ana may binebentang lupa, so ibig sabihin, subjected siya na kailangan niya magbayad ng VAT. And if ever naman na nagpapaupa ka or may pinapaupahan ka, so you as the owner or you as the lessor, kailangan mo din magbayad ng VAT. So, next is, in the sale of real properties on the installment plan, the seller is subjected to VAT on the installment payments received, including the interest and penalties for late payment. So, subject pa rin siya sa pagbayad ng VAT kapag installment yung babayaran. Kung magkano ang monthly dues mo is ayun yung computed na ibabat sa'yo. So, for letter B naman, yung mga pre-selling real estate, yung mga ginagawa pa lang na condo na binibenta na yung price is above 2 million. So, ibig sabihin, pag lumagpas ka sa 2 million na price doon, ibig sabihin, liable ka na sa pagbabayad ng VAT. And letter C, for sale of house and lot and other residential dwellings. So, for letter C, yung mga for sale na house and lot or other place of residence with a selling price of 3,199,200 is also subjected siya na kailangan niya magbayad ng VAT. Kasi from 2 million, naging 3.2 million na yung parang pinagbabasehan nila if ever na yung place na yun is liable na kailangan magbayad ng VAT. So, for letter D, sorry, less of residential units. So, for letter D, para maging subjected ka sa pagbabayad ng VAT is dapat yung gross annual rental is exceeding ka sa 3 million or 3.2 million. Number 3, so kung kanina is may transaction subject to VAT tayo. So ngayon may transaction not subjected to VAT. So yun yung mga transaction na ito yung mga transaction na hindi na kailangan magbayad ng VAT. So if ikaw ay nagbebenta ng property, hindi naman nga nag-exceed dun sa 3 million or 3.2 million na pinagbabasehan, ibig sabihin, hindi mo na kailangan magbayad ng VAT. And also, if kunyari, nagpapaupa ka naman ng bahay, so kanina nagbenta tayo ng bahay, so ngayon kunyari, nagpapaupa naman tayo. So, if yung monthly rental is hindi naman nag-exceed ng 15,000, yung 15,000 na is yung monthly yon. So, if ever na hindi naman nag-exceed ng 15,000 monthly, so ibig sabihin, kunyari hindi ka nag-exceed sa, for example, so for letter D, if ever na hindi ka nag-exceed sa 15,000 ng monthly rental, ibig sabihin, hindi ka na din subjected sa VAT. So for letter D, if yung monthly rental is hindi naman nag-exceed sa 15,000, ibig sabihin, hindi ka na din subjected na magbayad ng VAT. So, for letter E, transmission of real property for a trustee, if the property is to be held merely in trust for the trustor or beneficiary. So, yun yung mga example ng mga under ng mga transaction na hindi subjected na magbayad ng VAT. Next is about transaction taxable as sales. So first is yung barter or exchange. So yung barter or exchange, ito yung pagpapalitan ng materials or properties as sales.
Wait, tsaka nga pala, nakakainis yung TikTok mo. Tuwing umu-order na lang ako doon, laging mali-mali yung napapadala sa akin.
Sa akin din, te. Mali yung binadala. Umorder ako ng case. Mali yung case na dumating sa akin.
Ay, sa akin din, case din yung binili ko. Ngayon, gusto ko sanang case, yung cleared lang siya. Kasi dumating may kulay, te.
Eh, ganyan yung dumating sa akin. Gusto ko nga may kulay para natatakpan yung likod. Ito, wait lang.
Sige. Kunin ko lang din yung akin, papakita ko sa'yo.
Ito, te. Ito siya.
Tignan mo naman yung dumating, te.
Eh, ayun yung in-order ko.
Eh, ganyan dapat yung darating sa akin. Kasi ito yung dumating.
Palit na lang tayo.
Ito na lang, magpalit na lang tayo, sis. Gusto mo ka?
Ayan na, wala ka ng ano.
Wala nang problema.
Uy, pupunta ka sa birthday ni Rudy?
Oo naman, ikaw.
Oo, kaso nang problema nga ako sa gift.
Eh, di ba manufacturing kayo ng cosmetics? Ba't di ka na nandun kumuha? Tapos, ayun na lang yung irigalo.
Ay, oo nga, no, that's a good idea. Wait, I'll call my secretary na lang. Hello, good evening. Do we have more stocks on the makeup set?
Yes, madam. We have more stock here in our warehouse.
Oh, is that so? Can you give me one set of that particular item?
Sure, madam. I will send it to Jock Rider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tao po, ma. Uy, Max. Kamusta pala?
Papasok ka muna.
Thank you. May gawin lang pala sa utak ko, Max. Kailan mo siya mababayaran?
Walang ng pambayad na cash sa'yo. If it's okay with you, I can transfer my property to you, which is located in Cavite. If that's okay with you.
Siguro I'll check the place muna. If kung wala akong makitang possible na problem, kukunin ko siya.
Okay, sige.
Thank you.
So next is about retirement from or cessation of business. So what is retirement from or cessation of business? So it means that once you retired from that business or you stop pursuing that business, all good on hands, whether it is a capital goods or stock in trade or supplies or materials, all of that shall be deemed sales even if that business will have a new owner or it be transferred to the successor or not still it will be under of the sale. So in these circumstances, the deemed sale can be a tax refund according to the section 106 letter B, since it's a retirement or cessation of business. If your business is a sole proprietorship and you have a plan to sell your entire business, it means the owner of your business will change. It means, and next for letter B is about dissolution, or dissolution means is about dissolving or changing. So parang magbabago lahat. So if the business is a partnership and you're going to retire from that, it means that partnership will be dissolved and have a new creation of partnership to think about kung sino yung magte-takes over dun sa business na yun. Change in or cessation of status as a VAT registered person. So the person must be registered first for VAT with the appropriate tax authority. So this involves meeting and registration requirements such as reaching the specified turnover threshold set by the tax authority. So number 1 is subject to output tax. So it means they are obligated to charge and collect VAT from their customers on the taxable goods or services they provide. So for example of that is, let's say you run a consulting business and you are registered for VAT. You provide consulting service to a client for a total fee of $1,000. So excluding pa dun yung VAT na yun. So if i-apply na natin yung 12% VAT, so the client would need kailangan niyang bayaran the service fee of 1,000 plus the VAT amount of $150. So yung total amount na kailangan bayaran niya is $1,150. Kasi nga, since yung 150 is collected yan as VAT, so papasok dun as your output tax. So for number 2 is yung not subject to output tax. So if a person is not subject to output tax, it means that they are not required to charge or collect value-added tax or VAT from their customers on the taxable goods or services they provide. So for example, in many jurisdictions, basic food items, healthcare services, and educational services may be exempt from VAT. So if you are a provider of exempt supplies, so hindi ka na kailangan magbayad pa ng VAT. Determination of tax base. So in determination of tax base, there's some cases, so yun yung mga the commissioner needs to follow the rules and regulation by the Secretary of Finance to determine the suitable tax. For example, if you're going to sell a property and the commissioner said an appropriate tax and appropriate market value of that property, but you, the seller, you lower the price unreasonably than the actual market values. So Yun yung isang mga nangyayari sa pagbabase ng tax base, kung bakit nagbabase tayo ng tax base. Next is meaning of gross selling price. So, what is gross selling price? So, gross selling price, it is the total amount of the product or service that the buyer or the purchaser pays, but the VAT is excluded pa doon. So, but also, in business, we can avoid having a stock or excess product. So, it means na yung mga excess na yan can be under of excess tax, and that tax can be refunded according to the gross selling price. Next is determination of amount of gross selling property. So, number 1 is stated consideration of fair market value, whichever is higher. So, the seller and buyer agreed on the amount of money for the property. So, isa yun sa example. So, if they are both agreed to the amount of money of the property, it means the fair market value is generally it means that the fair market value is generally defined as the price at which property or asset would change hands between a willing buyer and a willing seller. So, both having reasonable knowledge of the relevant facts and either being under any compulsion to buy or sell. So, when the commissioner determines the fair market value, so they may take into consideration various factors, so such as recent sales of similar properties or assets, appraisals by qualified professionals, market conditions, and any other relevant information. So the goal is to arrive at an objective and reasonable statement of the value that reflects the current market conditions. So also the assessor's office is responsible for determining the fair market value of properties within their jurisdiction to ensure accurate and equitable taxation. So for number 3, rule where gross selling price is based on zonal value or market value. So for the zonal value is a predetermined value set by the government or relevant authorities to determine the assessed value or fair market value of properties within a specific zone or area. However, in cases where the zonal value is not available or cannot be determined, an alternative method is needed to establish the gross selling price within the zonal value is absent. So, the gross selling price is determined based on either the fair market value is shown in the latest real property tax declaration or the consideration amount agreed upon by the properties involved in the transaction, whichever is higher. So number 4 is rule where gross selling price is based on zonal value or market value. So dito naman hindi sinasama ang kabuuang presyo ng isang property, kinukuha lamang dito is yung VAT na nakakalculated na kailangan kunin sa inyo. So, number 5, last is rule where zonal value or fair market value is higher than stated consideration in sale on installment plan. So, suppose there is a property located in a particular zone or area. So, the zonal value or fair market value of the property as determined by the VAT by the tax authorities. So, example is $500,000. So, however, the buyer and seller agree on a stated consideration of $400,000. So, in their installment plan agreement, in this scenario, the rule would come into effect to address potential undervaluation or tax avoidance. So, the tax authority would compare the zonal value of $500,000 with the stated consideration of $400,000 tax calculation. So, the tax authority may calculate the applicable taxes based on the higher value, which is the zonal value of $500,000. So this ensures that the taxes are calculated accurately and based on the fair market value of the property. So example dito is kapag bibili ka ng car. So if mataas yung price ng car, so ibig sabihin mataas din ang babayaran mong VAT. It means pero pag installment naman mong babayaran yung car, kung anong presyo ng car at may interest pa yon, doon magbabase kung magkano itataas. So for example, if yung car, if you pay it pag babayaran mo siya ng buo, kunyari 1.2 million, then yung 12% na VAT, so ibig sabihin, yun lang yung babayaran mo. Pero kung installment mo siyang babayaran, so kunyari, yung original price niya is 1.2 million, plus yung installment niya, ay yung interest niya kunyari is nasa 500,000, so aabot siya ng 1,000,007, so parang nagiging 1.7 million siyang aabot. Plus yung 12% na VAT pa. So, yun yung babayaran.
Ayan. Di ba naghahanap ka ng motor? Ito, hiyaan ko sa'yo.
Uy, tamang-tama, naghahanap na ako. Ba't ngayon mo lang sinabi?
Wala kang magiging problema dito.
Fix ba lahat yan?
Ayos na ayos.
Sige sabi mo yan na. Sige, okay lang ako parang. Madali lang mo kausap ba? Ito na agad yung payment ko dun sa binibenta mo.
Ito naman yung susi na, siyempre, alam mo na.
Yes, makahasal ko pumapasok ako. Alam mo na. Hey, thank you ako. Sabi mo yan na walang magiging problema.
Walang problema yan.
Sige, sige. Thank you. Ano ba ito? Ba tayo umanda? Nangyari? Hello, Jet. Bakit ganito naman yung binenta mo sa akin ng motor? Kala ko ba walang problema? Ba't tayo mag-start? Pwede ba pumunta ka na lang dito para mapag-usapan natin kung ano yung problema ng motor? Sige, sige. Thank you.
Ayan.
Uy, Jade, kala ko ba walang problema to?
Ha? Walang problema na.
Ayaw ko mag-start eh.
Kwento na lang, pag-usapan na lang natin.
Sige, ganito na lang kung okay lang sa'yo ang naging posisyon ko. Bawasan mo na lang yung binayad ko sa'yo. Since sira nga yung motor mo, ayaw mag-start. Yung the rest, magpapagawa ko na lang para di rin ako lugi.
Sige, gano'n na lang gawin natin. Ito yung bawas para naman mapagawa ko yun to.
Okay na yung payment natin. Thank you.
Diana! Diana! Oh, ba't ka napapunta dito? Ito, pakikita ko sa'yo. Maraming promo. May mga promo dito. Pa-ordering kita.
Sige nga, tignan ko na dito sa iyo.
May discount kami ngayon, te. Kung kaya umorder ka na, maraming promo ngayon dito sa Avon.
Eh, paano yan? Paano yung way ng pagbayad ko? Diyan wala pa akong hawak na pera.
Ay, te, walang problema. Installment siya. Basta mabayaran mo siya within 15 days, may discount ka pa.
Ay, ganun.
Oh, order ka na.
Sige, sige, tignan ko muna. Ay, ito na lang, since paubos na yung lipstick ko.
Ito, tagang 270 lang. Sige, i-deliver ko na lang sa'yo bukas, ha?
Sige, sige.
Thank you!
No problem. Thank you then.
So let's move on to the importation of goods. So first things first is the rate and base of VAT on importation of goods. So there shall be levied, assessed, and collected on every importation of goods, whether for business or non-business use. So our VAT is 12%. And tax shall be based by three categories. First is the total value used by the Bureau of Customs. Bureau of Customs is responsible for tariffs and custom duties. Second is custom duties and excise taxes. Third is other charges such as postage, commissions, and similar charges such tax to be paid by the importer before the release of such goods from customs custody. So, B. When the custom duties are determined based on the quantity or volume of the imported goods, the VAT should be based on the landed cost plus excise taxes, if any. Transfer of goods by tax-exempt persons. Case of tax-free importation of goods into the Philippines by any person, entities, or agencies exempt from tax. So, sino-sino nga ba yung mga non-exempt? So, non-exempt mean if employees are non-exempt, kunyari sa person, if I am an employee, it means they are entitled to minimum wage and overtime pay when they work more than 40 hours. So, I am entitled to minimum pay and of course overtime pay when I pay overtime or over 40 hours. And ano ba nga yung non-exempt entities? Non-exempt entities are government-owned and controlled corporations. So, GOCC, including GSIS, SSS, and PHIC, or Philippine Health Insurance, ayun yung mga non-exempt entities. So, ayun yung mga example. Next is applicability and payment. The rates prescribed under Section 107A apply to all importation withdrawn from customs custody. So, meaning the VAT on importation shall be paid by the importer before the release of such goods from customs custody. So, ang importer din pala nagbabayad rin siya ng VAT para ma-release yung goods from the customs custody. Fourth, exempt importation. The VAT does not apply to exempt importation. Okay, meaning if imported goods are for view and display, only the same shall be shipped out of the Philippines after the exhibition is over. For example, painting, either business or non-business use, if you're going to view it to the public or display it to the public, you must or shall return it right after the exhibition. Kasi kung hindi mo siya return immediately, aanuhan ka ng VAT and excise taxes if the goods are not shipped immediately after the exhibition. Next is the rationale for imposing VAT on importation of goods. The VAT on importation is a tax on the privilege of importing goods, meaning it shall be paid by the importer before releasing it from customs custody. As I've said, ang importer, nagbabayad din siya ng VAT to release the goods na imported into the Philippines para ma-release siya sa custody ng customs. So, next, the rationale for imposing compensating tax applies to the VAT on importation for non-business use. So, ano ba yung purpose nito? And what is compensating tax? So, from the word compensating, imposed when a business or an individual uses tangible property, a service or a license, or a franchise that was acquired as a result of transaction with a person located outside the state. Meaning that the tax places able to the casual merchants where they are equal to established merchants who pay sales tax on articles imported by them and other taxes. So, in short, the casual merchants is equal to the established merchants. So, casual merchants, sila yung hindi pa established. In short, dito sa explanation na to, casual merchants is equal to established merchants. when importation begins and ends. So it says that on the book, importation begins when the carrying vessel or aircraft enters the jurisdiction of the Philippines with intention to unload. So, as the book says that importation begins when an aircraft or a vessel is entered the Philippines with an intention to unload the goods or merchandise na ipapasok dito, i-import dito. So number one, under the concept of bonded warehouse. So customs bonded warehouse is a duty-free zone for restricted goods or imported goods, and bonded warehouse are commonly used for storing goods like tobacco, alcohol, antiques, artworks, and other restricted items from certain countries for processing prior to delivery to their final destination. So warehouse or bonded warehouse, this is a place or a restricted duty-free zone wherein restricted items or goods are placed in here to be safe, to be kept, and ayan. The Philippines. Next is custom duty. So, refers to the amount of customs duty legally due and paid by the importer. For example, when the importer is entitled to a customs duty exemption, let's say 90%, and then the 10% duty should be considered in the computation of the VAT. So, bank charges, representing the service charges of the bank in connection with the importation of goods. So from the word itself, bank charges, it represents the service charges of the bank, especially or in connection with the importation of goods. Next term is arrastre charges, which the owner of consignee of an article or baggage has to pay for the handling, receiving, and custody of the imported or exported article of the baggage passengers. For example, bumili ako ng dog abroad or sa Korea, and I am responsible for paying the handling fee, the receiving and custody of the imported goods. So next is wharfage dues, calculated based on the weight of the cargo in tons or its volume in cubic meters, whichever is greater. So wharfage dues, it is also referred to as cargo dues or cargo dues, and it is calculated based on the weight of the cargo or kung gaano kabigat or kung gaano karami yung dala-dala. And next is brokerage fees charged by custom broker for services rendered to the effect of the release of the goods from customs custody. So, under ng brokerage fees or signing customs entries and other documents and making the necessary representation on behalf of the importer. Next is all other charges or expenses subject to importer to secure the release of goods from customs custody. So, it is subjected to the importer para ma-release niya yung goods from the custody of the customs. And next is landed cost, invoice price of the imported goods including cost of loading, shipping, and unloading at port of destination. So, landed cost, ito yung invoice price, ito yung total ng price ng imported goods, including na yung loading, shipping, and unloading sa port of destination.
So hello guys, this is my topic for today, exempt transactions. Number 1, in general, some sales of goods and services are exempt from VAT. That means if you sell these goods and services, you won't charge your customers any VAT. and if you buy them there will be no VAT to reclaim. Where a taxable person supplies only exempt goods or services, they are not generally entitled to register for value-added tax. Some goods and services such as education, healthcare, and financial services may be exempt from VAT. Number 2. Goods and properties. Importation of agriculture or marine food products for human consumption is not subject to VAT. Example of exempt agricultural or marine food products in original estate. Number 1. Fruits and vegetables. Number 2. Rice, corn, and other edible farm products. Number 3. Milk, egg, and meat products for human consumption. To be considered in their original estate, the goods must be in their raw form. However, those that underwent simple processing are also exempt. B. The importation of fertilizer and seeds is exempt to any importer. Example: assume that fertilizer in the foregoing illustration is subsequently sold by Ramos Farmers Cooperative to Juan Pedro member farmer. Juan Pedro shall treated as importer and shall be subjected to VAT, but only on vatable goods. Since the fertilizer is the VAT exempt goods, Juan Pedro shall not pay VAT on importation thereon. Let's see, importation of personal and household effects or professional implement by non-residents intending to resettle in the Philippines in foreign consumption, not subject to Philippines consumption tax. Example, me, Mr. Lesa, was employed abroad as an OFW. He went abroad taking with him personal effects such as clothes, pieces of personal jewelry, gadgets, aggregating 300,000 in value. When his contract ended, he returned to the Philippines bringing with him the same effects which now have an aggregate value of 280,000. D. Importation of professional instrument and implements, wearing apparel, domestic animal, and personal households effect. Example, Mr. Marquez, a professional boxer, applied for an application to migrate in the Philippines and was granted by the Philippine government. He brought his boxing gears and household effect, including his personal car, to the Philippines. The importation of professional instruments and household effects are exempt, but the importation of the car is subject to VAT. Letter E. Importation of all drugs, vaccines, and medical devices that directly used for the treatment of COVID-19 are exempt to VAT. Number 3. All other import of services is subject to final withholding VAT. The final withholding VAT is computed as 12% of the contract price. Unlike withholding income tax, this amount shall not be deducted upon the amount to be remitted abroad because it is deemed passed on by the non-resident service provider and withheld by the resident payer withholding agent. Examples: Number 1. Lease or use of properties of property rights owned by non-resident. Number 2. Services rendered to local insurance companies with respect to reinsurance premiums payable to non-residents. Number 3. Other services rendered in the Philippines by non-residents. So our next topic is zero rating. A sale by a VAT-registered person of goods tax at zero rate that shall not result in any output tax. However, the input tax on his purchases of goods related to zero rated shall be available as tax refundable. Example: the supplier of the goods is still required to register or comply with the tax laws, but they do not need to charge tax to their customer. Our next topic is distinctions between zero rating and exemption. Zero rating, it refers to a tax that 0% applied to a particular good or services. In the other words, the transaction is subject to tax, but the tax is set at 0. Once you have 0 rating, it means you are as a seller are allowed to refund your input tax. But exemption means that a specific goods or services is entirely exempted from tax. It means that the supplier does not need to register or comply with the tax laws for the particular product, and they do not charge tax to their customer, and the seller are not allowed to request of tax refund. Our next topic is substantiation of input tax credits. So, in importing products or goods or domestic purchase goods are also needed to have an input tax credit, whether it is credited against 0 rated or non-zero rated, or subjected to the 5% withholding VAT, must be substantiated and need supported documents for that. For example, importation of goods. So to check or substantiate is for input tax. You need to have the document showing the actual payment of VAT in imported goods. Means the substantiation is input tax credits refers to the mechanism by which business can recover the value-added tax they have paid on inputs or purchases made for their business activities. When businesses purchase goods or services, they generally pay VAT on those transactions. However, they can claim a credit or deduction for the VAT they have paid on their purchases against the VAT they collect on their sales. The net result is that businesses effectively pay VAT only on the value they add to the final goods or services. The substantiation of input tax credit is the process of providing evidence or documentation to support the claim for VAT recovery. It is crucial for businesses to maintain accurate records and documentation to substantiate their input tax credit. This documentation typically includes invoices, receipts, and other relevance supporting documents that demonstrate the VAT paid on purchases.
Hi, I am Christine. I'm going to give you some information about compliance requirement in VAT. PEC is registration of taxpayers, meaning person to subject to any internal revenue tax. Every person who is subjected to any internal revenue tax shall register appropriate revenue district officer. These are the following to considered in filing a registration. A. Within 10 days from the date of employment. B. On or before the commencement of the business. C. Before payment of any tax due. D. Upon filing a return, statement or declaration as required in the tax code, person liable to VAT. These are the people who engage in trading or business, sells, barters, or exchanges goods or properties, or the people who are also engaged in the sale of services subject to VAT. When the person was registering, they should follow the appropriate RDO using the BEAR forms and pay the annual registration fee. Application for registration. If the person is to file a registration at the RDO or Revenue District Office, it must be filled up within 30 days. Annual registration fee. The annual registration fee is 500 pesos using the BEAR form number 0605 for every separate or distinct establishment or place of business, including if kung anong klaseng facility kung san magaganapang bentahan, it shall be paid upon registration. Registration of each type of internal revenue tax. Bawat person na required na mag-register sa BEAR no. Sila ay obligated saya na mag-registering kahit anong typing internal revenue. Sila ay may karapatan na mag-filing return and magbayading taxes a mag-update such if may nagbago sa information. Yung mga tao na ang registered in VAT is tatawagan na VAT registered person. Transfer of registration. If young VAT registered person is lilipat ng pwesto or business, duty niya na update ang registration status by filing application for registration information update in the form that the BIR prescribed. Cancellation of registration. A VAT registered person may cancel his registration. These are the following that can cancel his or her registration. 1. The person can make a written application with an explanation that according to the gross sale receipt for the following 12 months are exempted because it's not exceed in 3 million. 2. The person is about to end the business and has no plan to start/open the business within 12 months. Persons required to VAT. 1. Any person that in the course of trade or business, sells, barters or exchanges goods or properties are liable to register for VAT if the gross sales or receipts salubing 12 months are exceeded sa 3 million. There are also reasonable grounds to believe that the person gross sales or receipts for the next 12 months are exempted or exceeded in 3 million. 2. Franchise in radio and television broadcasting whose gross annual receipt in a year is 10M register within 30 days from the end of the taxable quarter. Registration of non-VAT or exempt taxpayer. Under the Philippine Tax Code, a person who is required to register as a non-VAT or exempt taxpayer must do so within 10 days from the commencement of their business or transfer to a new tax status. Additionally, they are required to pay an annual registration fee of 500. The annual registration fee of 500 is a fixed amount that must be paid along with the registration process. It helps cover administrative costs associated with processing and maintaining taxpayer records. Compliance activities after registration as VAT taxpayer. There are the following. 1. Kailangan magbayad 500 fee para sa pag-filing registration VAT. 2. Required na i-register ang lahat ng recording transaction in order to know the result. 3. Once you're VAT taxpayer, you also need to register the sales invoice and the official receipt as a VAT invoice and VAT receipt so that the invoice and receipt can be subjected as VAT because you are already a VAT registered person. Also, if there is a registration subject to VAT, we have also for non-VAT also need to be registered so that it will not be subjected to VAT. 4. So if you're a VAT registered person, you're now allowed to pay the VAT monthly. The VAT is being paid every 21st of the month. You need just to present the receipts, gross sales. 5. Of course, when you will pay the VAT, you need to submit the summary list of your purchase, summary of your sales. All the liable VAT persons are required to submit the summary to RDO/LTDO. Next is cancellation or update of VAT registration. The person who is VAT registered may cancel registration for VAT. He or she can't cancel the registration of VAT. He or she makes a written application first, should explain and demonstrate to the commissioner's satisfaction that his or her gross rate is not to exceed 3 million annually. Also, he or she can also cancel the registration of VAT. He stops to carry on his trade or business before the renewal of business within the next 12 months. So here's the instance why the other owner of business cancelling their registration to VAT. One of that is if the owner want to change ownership to your business, it means there will be having a change of ownership in the case of sole proprietorship. For example, owner A will suddenly close his business, so the space he is building will have a new owner, and of course once he closed the business in less than a year when he registered for VAT, so he can cancel that and the owner will re-register. For liability for percentage tax. The taxpayer must be accountable to the percentage tax imposed in Section 116. The remaining period that he was VAT registered must be filed within 25 days from the date of cancellation of his registration. All requests for registration cancellation due to closure, any stop or end to business operations will be subject to immediate RDO conducting an investigation to ascertain the taxpayer's tax liabilities. then in minor charge in original registration. That's why it's called minor, because if the owner wants to change the address or have some typographical errors, he's not that bad, so there's no need to close the store first. It is only if there is a minor change it shall be affected by completing the registration form, and for cancellation of optional registration. Any person can cancel their optional registered, just apply for cancellation registration after 3 years, but the persons that cannot cancel their optional registration are the people on the radio or television broadcasting that their gross annual receipts for preceding year did not exceed to 10 million. It mean they are irrevocable. Last is for change of address. So in changing of address it means that if ever the organization or the VAT registered person changes the address, they need to file a notice in the prescribed form within 15 days from the days they leave in their old place to their new address. Also, if the VAT registered person changes his or her address from not within the revenue district and transfers to the revenue district, that person needs to file with the RDO or the revenue district office and notify the RDO to register. And if the VAT registered person has come from a revenue district, or to be more clear, if that VAT registered person has both of his or her former and new place address, the VAT registered person needs to notify both the RDO in his or her former and new address. Invoicing and accounting requirements for VAT registered persons. 1. Here the requirements of a taxpayer as a registered VAT are the same as the name of their business, is their business style restaurant or grocery store, and they are also required to register their TIN number. 2. The VAT receipts must have the following written or printed on them. A statement must state that you are VAT registered and on. Next to DON is the TIN number. B. It should also include what amount the purchaser paid for what you sold. The amount of tax on your receipts should be listed here, and if you are exempt from VAT, it must be written or printed that you are VAT exempt. Sale. And if your VAT is 0%, it should be written or printed on your receipts are 0 rated sale, and if you have all of them there is an option. You can separate them for better receipts. 3. Here, when the TIN number precedes the VAT, there are consequences as a non-VAT registered. Issuance of duly registered invoice or receipt. In issuance of duly registered invoices or receipt, if you are a VAT registered person or your business are VAT registered, need to registered invoices or receipt every sales or lease of goods. Also, if your business are big and have an accounting person, they need to record all the requirements that need to comply. Then next we have information to appear on official receipts/sales invoices, etc. The official receipts in sales shall have printed showing the information enumerated in Reverend Regs. No. 1. When you issue an official receipt shall have broken down to VA table sales, VAT amount, 0 rated and VAT exempt. 2. For non-VAT official receipt, when you issue a receipt to a buyer shall have indicated the phrase "this document is not valid for claim of input tax" printed in bold letters at the bottom of said documents. 3. For taxpayers, when the transaction is not subject to VAT or percentage tax, the official receipt should have indicated the word exempt. Invoicing and recording deemed sale transactions. 1. Upon transfer, use or consumption not in the course of business of goods, it is necessary to record the acquired goods for personal use. 2. The transaction invoice must be made at the time the transaction was made, which includes all the information. All information contained in the invoice will be recorded in the subsidiary sales journal. 3. At the end of the business, if there are any unsold goods left, the inventory must be arranged and submitted to the RDO no later than 30 days from the day the business ceases. For my last topic is filing of return and payment of VAT. Is a process of submitting a document to the appropriate tax authority. To file a VAT return, a business must first calculate the amount of VAT it has collected from its customers and deduct any VAT it has paid on purchases. Shall file a quarterly return within 25 days following the close of the taxable quarter. Then we also have electronic filing, in this way becoming increasingly popular because it is faster, more accurate, and more convenient than manual filing. It can also help taxpayers avoid errors, omissions, and other mistakes that can lead to penalties and interest charges. Note: filing a tax return is an important responsibility for all taxpayers. Failure to file a return or filing a return with inaccurate or incomplete information can result in penalties, interest charges, and other legal consequences. Thank you. I hope that you learned something from me. Goodbye.
So hello guys. So good afternoon everyone. I'm Diana Mariag and this is the next topic that I will discuss to all of you. First is persons required to withhold VAT. Individuals engaged in business or practice of profession. Non-individuals, corporations, associations, partnership, and cooperatives, whether engaged in business or not. Government agencies and its instrumentalities, national government agencies, government-owned or controlled corporations, local government units including barangays. Then the next one is the returns and payment of VAT withheld. The taxes that were withheld and deducted must be remitted to the revenue collection officer or to the duly authorized treasurer of the city or municipality where the withholding agent is required to register. The next is certificate of VAT withheld. It is the document that shows the amount of VAT that has been deducted or withheld from payments made to suppliers by a company or organization. The certificate of VAT withheld is typically issued by the company or organization that has withheld the VAT and is given to the supplier as proof that the VAT has been deducted and remitted to the government. This certificate is important for suppliers because they may be able to use it to claim a credit or refund for the VAT that has been withheld. Then the next one is substituted VAT return. Input taxes for the importation of goods or the domestic purchases must be substantiated and supported by the following documents. Para maklaim mo yung input taxes ng business mo, dapat ay may mga supported documents ka at need mo mag-comply ng mga requirements. And for the importation of goods, import entry or documents na resibo na nagpapakita ng actual na pagbabayad ng VAT sa mga imported na produkto. Then for the domestic purchase of goods and properties naman is ito yung mga invoice receipt or issuance of receipt na nagpapakita ng actual na pagbayad ng VAT. For the purchase of real property is ito naman yung deed of sale or contract agreement of the seller and the buyer together with VAT invoice issued by the seller. And for the purchase of services, official document providing the details required by the sections, the tax code sections 113 and 237. Then the next one is the regular VAT return. Is a document that businesses or organizations are required to submit to the tax authorities periodically, usually on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the country's regulations. The VAT return provides details about the sales and purchases made during the period and calculates the amount of VAT that is payable or refundable to the business or organization. The regular VAT return typically includes the following information. The next one is cancellation of option given to taxpayer. The option to remit the VAT under the withholding system.
So let's proceed to the meaning of certain terms. The first word is an importer. An importer is any person who brings goods into the Philippines. So an importer is responsible for transporting and delivering goods here into
A payee with just one pay or in a given taxable year and shall continue to apply to subsequent taxable years until the taxpayer files the notice of cancellation of availment of the substituted filing of return. If within the taxable year an additional client or customer comes in, the taxpayer payee shall immediately file the notice of cancellation of availment of the substituted filing of returns. And next is submission of quarterly summary list of sales and purchases. Number 1 is persons required. All persons liable for VAT, such as manufacturers, wholesalers, service providers, among others, are required to submit a summary list of sales. The number 2 is when and where to file the summary list of sales and purchases. Quarterly summary list of sales, purchases, whichever is applicable, shall be submitted in diskette form to the RDO, LTDO, or LTAD having jurisdiction over the taxpayer on or before the 25th day of the month. However, taxpayers under the jurisdiction of the LTS and those enrolled under the FEOS shall, through electronic filing facility, submit their list to the RDO, LTDO, LTAD, or on before the 30th day of the month. The number 3 is information that must be contained in the quarterly summary list of sales to be submitted. The quarterly summary list must contain the monthly total sales generated from the regular buyers or customers, regardless of the amount of sale per buyer, and from casual buyers or customers, with individual sales amounting to 100,000 pesos or more. Regular buyers and customers, taxpayers has transacted at least 6 transactions regardless of amount per transaction. Casual buyers and customers refer to buyers and customers in business but did not qualify as regular buyer and customers as defined in that statement. And for number 4 is for the claim input tax from revives rendered in the Philippines by non-residents, no summary list is required. And for number 5 is penalty costs. Under a tax code, if a person fails to file, keep or supply a statement, list, or information required on the date prescribed, shall pay upon notice and demand by the commissioner an administrative penalty of 1,000 pesos for each failure. However, the amount to be imposed for all such failures during a taxable year shall not exceed on 25,000 pesos. The next is power of the commissioner to suspend business operations of a taxpayer. Commissioner, it is a authorized representative, is empowered to suspend the business operations and temporarily close the establishments for any person for these violations. Number 1, in the case of a VAT registered person: A. Failure to issue receipts or invoices. B. Failure to file a VAT return. And C. Understatement of taxable sales of receipts by 30% or more of his correct taxable sales and receipts for the taxable quarter. The number 2, failure of any person to register. Temporary closure shall be for a duration of not less than 5 days and shall be lifted only upon compliance with whatever requirements prescribed by the Commissioner in the closure order. And the last one is surcharge, interest, and other penalties. Surcharge in BAT is an additional amount imposed as a penalty for non-compliance, such as late filing or late payment of BAT. The specific surcharge rate can vary depending on the jurisdiction and the severity of the non-compliance. It is typically calculated as a percentage of the BAT amount due and is added on top of the original BAT liability. Interest in BAT is charged on late payments or unpaid BAT amounts. It is calculated based on the outstanding BAT balance and is typically applied for each day the payment is delayed. The interest rate is determined by the tax authority and is usually specified in the local BAT regulations. The purpose of charging interest is to compensate the tax authority for the delayed payment of BAT. And about the penalties, BAT penalties can vary depending on the jurisdiction and the nature of the non-compliance. Penalties can be imposed for various reasons, including but not limited to failure to register for BAT when required, late submission of BAT returns or other BAT-related documents, failure to issue BAT, invoices or keep proper records, underreporting or misreporting of BAT amounts, and engaging in activities or intentional tax evasion. And that's the end of my topic. At I hope na may natutunan kayo sa aking mga diniscuss ngayong araw. At sana maintindihan nyo bawat topic na tinalakay ko sa inyo isa-isa. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig.